Hi, I'm Dr. David Wheeler-Reed, and this is RS-252-1 as well as RS-252-DL if you're taking this course online. This course is called The Gospels, and this is for Mod 3, Spring 2018. In this introduction, what I want to do is spend some time talking about the course and particularly just going through the course syllabus. So if you haven't downloaded the course syllabus yet, it is on the e-learning website. It is there as a PDF file. If you're having trouble accessing it, please email me and I will send it to you as a Word file, but it is online as a PDF file. So you should be following along here with the syllabus, which is what we're going to do in this introduction, is we're just simply going to go through the syllabus and talk a bit about the course, and then on Thursday we will get into our first assignment, which I'll talk about here as well when we come to the end of working through the syllabus. So once again, please print out or have the syllabus handy, be looking at it here as we start to go through this course. So this is one of many religious studies courses that's offered at Albertus Magnus College, which counts toward your degree. If you're looking at the syllabus on the first page, as I've already pointed out, this is RS-2521, which is a blended version of this course. It also is RS-252DL, which is a completely online version of this course. I should tell you from the start, and I believe I said this in an email, if you are in the online only version of the course, you are always welcome to come on Thursday nights to the course and sit in on the lectures if you like. So you don't have to do that, but if it makes things simpler for you, or if it helps to explain things, or you just want to come every now and then, that is totally fine. So this is a course on the Gospels. The Gospels are 4 books that appear in what's called the New Testament, which is important to Christians. The Gospels that we'll be looking at are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That will comprise most of what we're going to do in this course, is talk about those texts. And if you look under the course description, what this course is about is reading and discussion informed by contemporary historical criticism. I want to talk about that term here in a moment, of the 4 Gospels of the canonical Christian scriptures. In other words, the New Testament. If that's a term that's not familiar to you, don't worry about that. We will talk about that starting on Thursday. Students will also read at least one of the non-canonical Gospels, such as the Gospel of Thomas. In fact, you will be reading the Gospel of Thomas in this course. It is a very important Gospel that did not make it into the New Testament, but it is a text that you should read. This course will end with a brief discussion on contemporary quests for the historical Jesus. So what I mean by that is, after we have studied Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Thomas, which all talk about the life of Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, we're going to move on and ask questions about, well, what in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, even Thomas is historical? Is it possible to recover or reconstruct or even construct a historical Jesus out of the data that we now have? And again, I'll come back to that here in a second. This course is sophomore standing or permission of the instructor, so if you don't have sophomore standing, please let me know right away so I can give you permission to take this course. And as you can see, this course is generally offered every other year. Now, I italicize the words there, historical criticism, something I'm going to talk a bit more about on Thursday. But this is the overall approach that we're going to take in this course. We are going to approach the Gospels and we are going to approach Jesus from the perspective of historians. That means, I realize this is a Roman Catholic school. I realize this is a Roman Catholic school in the Dominican tradition. But what historical criticism is it's a method, and that's all it is, for talking about Jesus, talking about the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, not from a perspective of faith. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but talking about these texts and Jesus from the perspective of historians. And part of the reason we're doing that is, even though Albertus Magnus College is Catholic, I'm Catholic myself, I'm actually a member of the Dominican order, even though this is a Catholic school, there is no expectation that you going to this school be Catholic. There is no expectation of you going to this school that you be religious. Uh, Part of why we're going to use the historical critical method is because it's a method that people who are Christian, people who are non-Christian, etc., can use to try and understand the Gospels in their historical context and understand Jesus as a historical figure. And again, we'll get into this more on Thursday, and I'll give you some examples of how this works. But throughout this course, we're not talking about the Gospels from a Catholic perspective, a Protestant perspective, an Orthodox perspective. We are going to approach these texts as historians. And this is part of the mission of the Religious Studies Department here at Albertus Magnus College to help you become a better critical thinker. In fact, when I'm asked, what is the purpose of taking courses at a liberal arts education? A liberal arts college. There are three things that should happen in a liberal arts education. One, you should become a critical thinker. Two, you should become a better writer. And three, you should become a better reader of texts. And so what we're doing here is we're going to engage in critical thinking exercises using these religious texts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and talking about Jesus as a historical figure. So that's the approach we're going to take. So if you have no religious background, that's totally fine, because most people coming to this course, even if they have a Christian background or a Catholic background, have not used something like the historical critical method before. If we move on then to the next part of the syllabus, program and course offering information. This program, the program for this course is through Philosophy and Religion, the Philosophy and Religious Studies Department. As I said, this is Mod 3. Our classes, if you're online, are Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'll explain a bit more about that when I want work due, all that sort of stuff here in a second. But if you're in the blended course, the online portion is on Tuesday. The Thursday night portion will meet at Albertus Magnus College from 5:30 p.m. to 7:50 p.m. And as of the time of recording this, I do not know what the room number is yet because no one has told me. So as soon as I find out, I will email all of you and let you know. So online, you don't have to meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays at Albertus, but you're welcome to if you'd like to join us. So there are two versions of this course going on simultaneously. There is a blended version and there is an online version. If you are registered with a course listing that says DL, that is the online version. The RS2521 is the blended version. All right, under textbooks and supplementary readings, and obviously this is a 3-credit course, there are 2 books that you're going to use for this class. I want you to have both of them. The first text you're going to use, if you got it from the bookstore, you ordered it from Amazon.com or something like that, is a red-covered paperback book called the New Oxford Annotated Bible, New Revised Standard Version. That's what NRSV stands for, New Revised Standard Version with Apocrypha. Make sure you have the 4th edition. It's published by Oxford University Press out of Oxford, England. A couple of things on this text. It is very important in a class like this that we are all reading the same translation of the Gospels, of the Bible. This particular text, published by Oxford University Press, is a standard academic scholarly Bible. New Revised Standard Version is the most complete, recent, and not that any translation of a religious text is ever 100% accurate, but this is about as accurate as we're ever going to get with it, at least right now, when it comes to an English translation of the Gospels and of the Bible. Now, as you can see, this is a gigantic book. It includes the Old Testament, it includes the Apocrypha, and it includes the New Testament. I will talk about those terms on Thursday if you do not know what they are. For our purposes, we are going to be looking at 4 writings that come out of a section of the New Oxford Annotated Bible known as the New Testament. The first 4 books of the New Testament are the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. The Gospel of Thomas I will have to give you as an electronic reading. But this is going to be our main textbook. In this book, we will read Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. There are also some scholarly articles in this text that we will also be looking at. If you are not familiar with how to use a Bible, don't be ashamed on that. I have added a file for you in the introductory section of this course called How to Use a Bible, and you can look at that. If that doesn't make sense, please contact me, and I will do my best to explain to you how chapters, verses, books, etc. work in the New Testament. Anytime I tell you page numbers in the New Oxford Annotated Bible, those are going to be scholarly articles that you're going to read about the themes, texts, etc. that we're going to be studying. So that's going to be our main book, and we're going to use that first and foremost. The second book that you need is something called Gospel Parallels, a comparison of the Synoptic Gospels. Synoptic Gospels, as you will discover, is a term that academics and scholars assign to Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Gospel Parallels is a way of reading Matthew, Mark, Luke side by side. John does not fit into the category of synoptic Gospels. The Gospel Parallels book is a synopsis that helps you read Matthew, Mark, Luke together and side by side. There's a reason for why you would want to do that, which you don't need to know now, but this is a text that we're going to use a lot in this course. It's going to be the basis of a lot of your assignments. It's going to be the basis of your final exam, but it will be a week or two, probably 2, maybe 3 weeks at the most, before we actually start using this text. And in fact, I will have to show you how to use Gospel Parallels before we start using it. So you need both of these texts. They are both part of the New Revised Standard Version. And if nobody has told you, in any academic setting, whether it's a religious setting, a religious college like Albertus Magnus, a liberal arts college like Trinity in Hartford, whether it's a secular school like the University of Connecticut, you should always, in your papers, quote the biblical text from the New Revised Standard Version. That's what MLA requires, that's what APA requires, that's what the Chicago Manual of Style requires. So if no one has told you that, you should always, in academic papers, quote the Bible from the NRSV. If you don't normally use that translation, again, it's important in a class like this that we are all reading the same version of these texts called the Gospels. Moving on down then, here's my information. My name is David Wheeler-Reed, Dr. David Wheeler-Reed. Since we're all adults in this class, don't feel like you have to refer to me as Professor Wheeler-Reed or Dr. Wheeler-Reed. You are more than welcome to refer to me as David. That's not going to bother me. You're not 19-year-old undergrads. I just very briefly, and I'll say more about myself as we go throughout this course. A few years ago, I received my PhD from the University of Toronto in Toronto, Canada. I am not Canadian, by the way. I just did my graduate education in Canada. I have a PhD in New Testament and early Christian origins. After I finished my PhD at Toronto, I was a postdoc researcher at the University of Notre Dame, and after that, I was a visiting fellow at Yale Divinity School, where I wrote my first book that came out a couple months ago with Yale University Press called Regulating Sex in the Roman Empire. Mainly when it comes to the areas of early Christianity and the ancient world, I spent a lot of time studying marriage, sex, sexuality, gender, procreation, women, you name it, in early Christianity, early Judaism, and the Greek and Roman worlds. I have been for a while a visiting instructor, a visiting professor here at Albertus Magnus College, and now I teach full-time here in the Religion and Philosophy Department. My email address here, you can see, is dwheelerreed@albertus.edu. That is the absolute easiest way to get in touch with me. I make it a habit of responding to my emails within 24 hours. Usually it's at a much quicker rate than that. I do not like it when people do not respond to my emails in a timely manner. The easiest way to get a hold of me is using my email address, but you may also call me at 203-780-1326 and leave a message, and I will get back to you. Sometimes it's easier for people to call and ask their question as opposed to writing about it, but again, the easiest way to always get a hold of me is through my email address. As far as office hours go, that's a little difficult to do with evening classes and online courses, but if you need to see me, and I encourage you to do so at the very first moment you are having a problem in the course, don't let it linger. Just make an appointment with me and I will try to work around your schedule. If we are meeting in the blended section, I would suggest either meeting before class on Thursday evenings or after class on Thursday evenings. But if that doesn't work, I am always up for making an appointment and working around your schedule. You can also contact me at the iCloud email address that I've provided, but I would first use the Albertus email address. As you'll see here, there are a number of policies, course policies, that are on this syllabus. We are now required by law at Albertus Magnus College to put a number of the things that I have here on the syllabus on the syllabus. So this is something that the academic dean has asked us to do, and it's also something that we are required by the state of Connecticut to do. It's also something that the federal government requires us to do. I would suggest that you read through all of these. You might know what these policies are already, but it's always good to at least read through them and refresh your memory about these policies. You have agreed to these policies by signing up as a student here at Albertus Magnus College. Some of these policies will not apply to you. Some of them will. The tradition of honor will not apply to you. It's very, very difficult to have somebody write their name and I declare the honor pledge in an electronic format, but you should be familiar with that. If you ever take an exam in class at Albertus Magnus, you are required to write I declare the honor pledge on each examination, and essentially what you're saying is you understand what's involved if you happen to cheat on an exam. Intellectual honesty applies more here in this particular program and this course, online and blended. Intellectual honesty has to do with plagiarism, which is an extremely serious offense that can hurt your academic career. Plagiarism, as you can see there in the first sentence, is a serious offense against academic integrity and intellectual honesty. Essentially, plagiarism is when you copy somebody else's work and don't give them credit for it. If you're ever confused as to exactly what is and is not plagiarism, please write me. I have a whole file of examples of what is and what isn't plagiarism. Plagiarism usually applies more not to taking exams, but to writing up papers and writing responses on forums. One of the things you should know about this is when in doubt, always cite where you got something from. It's better to oversight your sources and protect yourself than to undercite. You won't have in this course a formal paper, so the writing guidelines here don't necessarily apply, but at Albertus Magnus College, the two writing styles that are accepted are the APA, American Psychological Association style, and the MLA, the Modern Language Association style. If you are not familiar with either of those styles, I would suggest buying the APA style guide or buying the MLA style guide. Those style guides as reference works explain everything you need to know about how to write a paper in those styles for Albertus Magnus College. But again, you're not going to be writing a paper in this particular class, so these writing styles will not apply. In terms of classroom conduct, The only thing I would say on this is usually this never happens with adult students, but this policy of appropriate classroom conduct does have to do with um, treating one another with dignity and respect. Uh, the only thing I say on this is in a religious studies course, sometimes people have really different beliefs and really different views on things. I have mine, and I do my utmost to try and respect and understand everyone else's views, but I would ask that you do the same. There might be things you learn in this class or hear other people saying that you don't necessarily agree with. My response to that is that's part of being an adult. That's part of a liberal arts education. That's part of learning. And that's part of what it means to go to a university or go to college is learning different ideas, different points of view, and being respectful to those you disagree with, because they might disagree with you as well. If you ever feel as a student that your views are being threatened or you as a person are being disrespected in a course, please let me know, and we will take the appropriate actions for that. So usually everything is fine, every opinion is fine, every idea is fine, every question is fine in my courses. The only limit is when it becomes inappropriate in terms of what it's doing to another student. If you are a special needs student, please let me know right away. There are forms that I need to sign. I don't want to find out halfway through the course that you're a special needs student. I need to know that right away. As you can see, those students seeking accommodation based on disability should provide a faculty contact sheet obtained through the Academic Development Center, room 314 in Aquinas Hall. You can reach them at 203-773-8564. So if you are a special needs student, let me know sooner rather than later. Sooner as in like by Thursday or something like that. You won't be using the library in this course. All of what you're going to be doing will either be available online or will come from your 2 textbooks, so you don't need to worry about that. If you flip over to page 3, yes, this is a blended and online course, which means all of you, whether you are doing this totally online or doing this as a blended course, will be writing things online that your colleagues and peers and fellow classmates will see. If you do not understand or have not read Albertus's Netiquette Guide, I suggest that you do that. Again, the same sort of principles of respect, integrity, dignity, etc. apply when you are writing forum posts or you're responding to me or responding to other students in this course. There is a right way to respond and a wrong way to respond. Usually this is not a problem, but if you are not familiar with online etiquette, I suggest reading this. In other words, your posts have to sound different than some social media posts sound. I would also stress to you that when I respond to your posts, I will often push you to keep thinking and to keep going. I will often question what you are saying because that is my job. Please don't take me doing that as a threat to what you said or me mocking what you said or anything like that. I am just pushing you. And sometimes I'll be honest with you. I am playing devil's advocate and taking the opposite point of view just to get you to think. Which leads me to say, if you ever need to know what I really think or believe about something, please just ask me. Don't assume you understand, because sometimes in a class I am purposely taking the opposite view of what I think, just to push students to critically think and to dig deeper on a topic. All that information is there for withdrawing from a course. Let me just read this to you. It is the responsibility of the student to officially drop or withdraw from a course. However, failure to attend a course for 14 calendar days may result in an administrative withdrawal from the course. The policies on course withdrawals and administrative withdrawals may be found online at that particular web address. You can click on it if you need to see those policies, but please be aware of that. I also want to read to you here, because this is somewhat misunderstood by Alberta students in the accelerated degree program and also during the day, the definition of a credit hour. So this is a 3-credit hour course. So let me read this to you and then explain it in perhaps simpler language, or at least try to summarize it. Albertus Magnus College adheres to the definition of a credit hour as defined by Federal Regulation 34 CFR 600.2 as passed by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Post-Secondary Education. So therefore, the college's definition of a credit hour is as follows. A credit hour is an amount of work represented in intended learning outcomes and verified by evidence of student achievement that reasonably approximates, not less than, keyword there is not less than, 1 hour of classroom or direct faculty instruction and a minimum of 2 hours of out-of-class student work each week for approximately 15 weeks for one semester, or the equivalent amount of work over a different time, so 8 weeks in your case, because you basically are doing double the work from a regular semester each week, or 2, at least an equivalent amount of work is required in paragraph 1 of this definition for other academic activities as established by the college, including laboratory work, internships, practica, studio work, and other academic work leading to the award of credit hours. What all of this is saying is that in a 3-credit hour course, you are going to be in class. So if this was a normal 15-week course, you would be in class 3 hours a week. Outside of class, you would do at least 2 hours of work. I have, as you'll see here later on, tried to give you an approximation of the amount of work you will be doing per week. Just so you can set your schedule. And this is not something that I've come up with. Again, it's not something the college has come up with. This is what the U.S. Department of Education says we must be doing in the United States in colleges and universities. So I am trying to assign you the appropriate amount of work, reading, lectures, etc. to fulfill this. In other words, I don't have a choice but to fulfill this. That means in any course, some weeks you will be doing this exactly. You'll spend 3 hours on lectures, things like that, and then you'll spend 2 hours on outside work. Sometimes it'll be more, sometimes it'll be less, but it basically evens out to what this definition says. If you have any questions on that, you can ask me, or I can point you into to the right direction to learn more about that. But that is the standard that is set by the U.S. Department of Education for colleges and universities throughout the United States. As far as grading and attendance policies go, attendance is mandatory. I will not turn in your attendance till the end of the week. So when I talk about a week, I'm assuming the end of the week is Sunday. Basically, on online courses and blended courses, you show me your attendance by doing the online assignments. If you're in the blended course, you show me that you have attended by doing the online assignments and by coming to class on Thursdays. Online attendance is mandatory as well, so you need to be doing the online assignments. And we have the ability, if no one has told you, to see if you've been logging into the website and what you have been doing and how long you have taken in doing some of the assignments, finishing some of the assignments. As far as what you're going to be graded on, whether you are in the online only or the blended version of this course, you will be graded on your attendance, which will count for 15% of your grade. That is enough that if you attend every class and you are borderline, let's say between a C plus and a B minus, it will push you into the B range. It could also hurt you and drop you. You also, in evening classes, get in a lot of trouble if you miss two courses or 2 sections of the course in a given week. So if you don't do the assignments and you miss a Thursday course, for example, that becomes very, very problematic. Uh, like I said, if you do enough of this, the people who run the accelerated degree program will reach out to you and so on and so forth. So attendance is 15% of your grade. You are also going to have a number of online forums in which I will give you questions from your readings, from the lecture, etc., that you will need to respond to. I will go through what those forums are here in a minute, but you will do this through the e-learning site. And each forum will be labeled forum number 1, forum number 2, etc. And then you are going to have what is called a final exegetical assignment that will have to do with the Gospel Parallels book. I don't want you to worry about this yet, or worry about what the term exegetical means, which comes from the term exegesis. We will get to that later on. You just set that aside for a moment. But this will be a final project you will turn into me. It will be directed by questions that I will give you relating to the Gospel Parallels book, but we will practice numerous times with the Gospel Parallel book before you actually do this final assignment, which will be worth 55% of your grade. So attendance is 15, the online forums is 30%, the final exegetical assignment is 55%. I will ease you into all of this, so as of this week, you do not have anything due. But flip over to page 4. Here are the course objectives and the learning outcomes. And when you get to that point in the course where you fill out, and I hope you do fill out because usually people don't, the online evaluations. This is how you evaluate whether or not this course worked or whether or not you learned anything. You go back to these course objectives and to these learning outcomes, and you ask yourself whether or not you can do the things that are listed here. And if you can, wonderful. You talk about that on the evaluation. If you can't, you need to ask why. So the basic objectives for this course are these. By the completion of this course, each student will be able to carry out basic exegesis on the 4 Gospels. What the word exegesis means is it means you're able to read a text and read out from it. So you can read a chapter, let's say in the Gospel of Matthew, and you would be able to look at it and say, by reading that text and with the tools I've been given, I can tell you what this text is basically about by reading it. Eisegesis is the opposite of exegesis. Eisegesis is what most of us do when we read text. It's where we read our own meaning into the text. But exegesis is where you say, this is what the text meant to an author. And this is a big part of the historical critical method. It's not so much you asking the question of what does the text mean to me? It's you asking what did the text mean to the original people who heard it and to the people or person who wrote it. So you should be able in a basic fashion to look at any of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Thomas by the time we're done with this course, and do that. You should also be able to list the main literary themes of the 4 Gospels. So if I were to ask you at the end of the course, who is Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew? You should have an answer to that. Who is Jesus in the Gospel of Mark? You should have an answer to that. What is the basic ideas behind the Gospel of Luke and why are they there? You should be able to answer that. You should also be able to differentiate between the portraits of Jesus in the 4 canonical Gospels. As you're going to discover, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all have a different take on who Jesus happens to be. Sometimes it's very slight, and sometimes the differences are major. Particularly between Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There's Matthew, Mark, and Luke have a Jesus that's very similar, but when you start comparing that Jesus to John, things become problematic. But again, you should be able to say, well, this is what Luke does with Jesus. This is what Mark does. This is what John does with Jesus. You should also be able to use historical criticism, which we're going to talk about on Thursday, to reconstruct or construct a plausible historical Jesus. So by the time you get out of this class, you should have learned some basic principles that all historians use to try and recover a historical figure from ancient history. And you should be able to say, using the historical critical method that you'll learn throughout this course, this is probably who Jesus was. So this is not going to be constructing a Catholic Jesus or a Baptist Jesus or anything like that. It's going to be trying to construct a Jesus from 2,000 years ago who is a first century Jew living in a place called Israel/Palestine. And finally, you should be able to reflect on the differences between the Jesus of history and the Jesus of faith. You should be able to tell someone if they ask, well, what are you learning about the Gospels? What are you learning about Jesus in this course? You should be able to say, well, this is what I've learned. That the historical Jesus, the church I belong to has kind of changed some of the stuff he's teaching or some of the stuff he did, that it's not actually what went on historically, or I've now come to understand something I thought worked this way. I've come to understand it very differently. And I'll talk more about this Jesus of history versus the Jesus of faith later on. But this is an important part of this class of coming to grips with, is the Jesus of 2,000 years ago the same Jesus that Christians talk about today? Are there similarities? Are there differences? And what do we do about those similarities and differences? Because remember, we live in 21st century American society. Jesus lived in first century Palestinian society. Very, very different. Along with the course objectives are learning outcomes. So again, this is how you should evaluate this course. So by the completion of this course, this is what you should know, or this is what you should demonstrate. You should know and demonstrate the basic steps of the historical critical method. We will talk about what those are on Thursday. And you should be able to apply the historical critical method to any figure in ancient or modern history. So whatever you learn about historical criticism and being a historian in this course, it applies to Jesus as well as it applies to trying to figure out who is the historical Abraham Lincoln. You should also know a basic outline of Jesus' life. You should also know the basic teachings of Jesus. You should be able, if somebody asks you after this course, what's the main thing Jesus taught, you should be able to tell them right away, this is what Jesus taught, and this is basically who Jesus was. Now, to understand the Gospels and Jesus, we're going to have to spend a couple of sessions talking about the Greco-Roman world, that is the worlds of Greece and Rome, which very much affect the society that Jesus was a part of, since Israel is occupied by the Roman Empire. And you also will learn some things about something known as Second Temple Judaism, which is the Judaism that Jesus belonged to. That's what scholars call that Judaism, Second Temple Judaism. So you're going to get, in a week here, I think next week, you're going to get a crash course, if you will, in you're going to get a crash course in Greco-Roman religion, the Greco-Roman world, Greco-Roman philosophy, and Second Temple Judaism. What is Judaism in the time of Jesus? How does it work? So you'll be learning about a lot of things, and you should be able to say to somebody at the end of this course of, well, here's what the Greeks and Romans thought and believed in the time of Jesus. Here's how it affected the writers of the Gospels. You should also demonstrate advanced, improved critical thinking, as well as improved writing and reading skills. Again, every liberal arts class is designed to do three things: make you a better critical thinker, make you a better writer, and make you a better reader. And finally, you should be able to demonstrate a basic knowledge of why the Gospels and why Jesus. Why are they still important? Why is Jesus still an important figure in 21st century society? Whether you believe in Jesus or not, Jesus is arguably a historical figure that still affects us all the way down to this day, especially if you live in the United States. So let me just run through the schedule here. I know you can all read through this at your own leisure, but what I've done is divided the syllabus into weeks. So week 1, week 2, week 3, all the way down to week 8. You should always hold on to this syllabus. Check off week by week by week what you have done and what you have not done. This is your lifeline to this course. So as you can see here, for the first week, the Tuesday date is January 16th. The Thursday date is January 18th. For each week, I will tell you, here's the Tuesday date, here's the Thursday date. Obviously, if you're in the blended course, we're meeting on Thursdays starting at 5:30. But whether you are in the blended course or you are in the online-only course, I want to make this very clear. All of your work for the week should be finished by Sunday at midnight. So it's not due on the 18th. So you would have Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday to turn it in. And then come Monday, I will go back. I will look at your work. If you turn it in before then, I will look at it over the weekend. I will also enter in your attendance for the week. So every week, no matter what the work is, assume you have the entire week to finish it. That will hold true into the very last week, which ends on a Saturday. But up to week 8, you have till Sunday at midnight to get everything into me for that week. Each week you will see the dates, and then you will see the topic or topics we are talking about. So this week we are talking about the syllabus as we're doing right now, and on Thursday you will have a lecture called Why Study Jesus and the Gospels. And in that lecture we're going to talk more about the historical critical method, the New Testament, the Gospels, etc. Each week, too, I will list out for you learning objectives of what you should know by the end of that week. This is the main, there are many things you should know, but this is the main thing I want you to be able to talk about at the end of this week or that week. So at the end of week 1, you should be able to reflect on the historical critical method and its importance for studying Jesus, and you should be able to deconstruct your own assumptions about Jesus of Nazareth. In other words, what I mean is you should start thinking about, why do I think this about Jesus, or why do I think that? Why do I believe this about Jesus? Or why do I not believe that about Jesus? And you should really think, what's behind that? And part of the historical critical method throughout this course is going to get you to do that, to think, why do I think or believe what I think or believe? Your reading assignment for this week is very simple, the syllabus. You will have an online forum that will be due Sunday, January 21st at midnight. The online forum is simply an introduction in which you will introduce yourself to me and to the rest of the class. You can also read an introduction about me, which will be on the e-learning website right at the top in the introductory section of the course. So each week is going to be like this. And again, some weeks you'll have more, some weeks you'll have less stuff that you'll need to do. But you need to always refer to these things. Now, just so you know, your first part of the week, so your Tuesday part of the course, part 1 of the week, will go up on the weekend. Your Thursday component, especially if you're online, will go up on Wednesdays. But again, you have till Sunday at midnight to complete the week worth of assignments. As you'll also see when you flip over to page 5, each week I will give you a description of the homework assignments. In this case, listen to the online lecture. Lectures will always be there every single week. You need to read the syllabus and you need to respond to questions listed in form number 1. So I'm giving you each week everything you need to do. So just take the syllabus, highlight stuff, check it off when you're done. You can also do that online on the e-learning site. For this week and each week I'm going to do this, all of this is going to take you between 1 to 3 hours. It just depends on you as a person how long it's going to take. On average, it's probably going to take you 1.5 to 2 hours this week to finish these assignments. Week 2, let me just go over the other weeks very quickly here. Week 2 will be the 23rd and the 25th of January, and the topic for this week is going to be the development of the New Testament canon. You will have reading, as you will see here from the New Oxford Annotated Bible, so the reading is getting a bit more. You will have a second forum question. Each of these forum questions will have guided questions from me about the lectures, your reading, etc. And again, the due date will be Sunday the 28th. And this will also take you about 2 to 3 hours. The development of the New Testament canon is important for you to understand in a course like this because many people have questions about how did we get the Gospels, how did we get Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and why those 4 books and not others. So we'll be talking about that week 2. Week 3 will be an introduction, a crash course, if you will, to the Greco-Roman world of the first century and to ancient Judaism. You will know enough at the end of this to absolutely be dangerous with the knowledge that you have, but you will know something about this. You will have some reading in the New Oxford Annotated Bible, and you will look at a very important letter that a governor named Pliny wrote to the Roman Emperor Trajan. That is one of our only extant texts telling us what Romans thought of Christians very early on. If you flip over to page 6, week 4, we're into February by now. We will be talking that week about the Gospel of Mark and then the Gospel of Matthew. As you will discover, we're going to read Mark first because historians believe Mark was the first Gospel. Matthew and Luke and John came later. You will start to work with literary themes in the Gospel of Mark and the Gospel of Matthew. You will start to work through similarities and differences. Matthew and Mark are found in the New Oxford Annotated Bible. And we will also start talking about gospel parallels and using that gospel parallels book come week 4. And so we're going to have a lecture about how to use this book because what gospel parallels is going to allow you to do is compare stories in Mark with stories in Matthew with stories in Luke. I don't want you to worry about that yet. I'm going to ease you into that, but starting in week 4, you will also begin using the Gospel Parallels book. So in this case, in week 4, we're going to look at how the baptism of Jesus is discussed in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and we're going to talk about similarities and differences between the baptism of Jesus in those 3 texts. Week 4, before I move on, week 4 will probably be the longest week of work that you have, so plan accordingly on that. It's just because it'll take you a while when you first start using the Gospel Parallels book to get a hang of what's going on. Week 5 is the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Luke. The Gospel of Thomas is not in the New Testament. I will give you an electronic copy of the Gospel of Thomas, which will be online. When you read it, you will not understand it, but we will work through it. And you will also begin reading the Gospel of Luke. Week 6 will be the Acts of the Apostles, which you will discover is part 2 of Luke's Gospel. Luke's Gospel has volume 1, volume 2. Unfortunately, in the New Testament, people don't realize that because the 2 volumes have been split from one another. So you will be reading this book called the Acts of the Apostles, which is Luke's attempt to write a history of early Christianity. And we will continue working through some gospel parallels material. Week 7, we will look at the Gospel of John. And our task there will be to clarify similarities and differences between Matthew, Mark, and Luke and John. Matthew, Mark, and Luke can all be read together for reasons we'll get into later on. John is doing something entirely different. And one of the things we'll deal with in week 7 is the death of Jesus in Matthew, Mark, and Luke versus the death of Jesus in John. Finally, our last week will be a discussion on the historical Jesus. How do you find Jesus out of these documents? What's true? What's not true? What's exaggerated? What's myth? What's legend? What's history? Your objective here will be to take everything we've done for 7 weeks and apply it. So you're going to have to carry out week 7, a very informed reconstruction or construction I will at some point explain to you why I keep writing reconstruction the way I write it. You will have to carry out an informed reconstruction or construction of a plausible historical Jesus. I will tell you right now that one of the fun things about a Gospels class is that most people reconstruct Jesus in their own image. Part of what a course like this is trying to get you to do is not do that. You're also going to read some texts called apocalyptic texts that were written at the time of Jesus that will help you better understand Jesus as a historical figure. And you'll be working with Mark chapter 13 and parallels in the Gospel Parallels book. Your final exegetical assignment will be due Saturday, not Sunday, Saturday, March 10th by midnight. But again, you will be well prepared to do that assignment before you get there. So that's the basic outline of the course. That's what we're going to be doing. So your next task is to go back through and make sure you understand the syllabus, ask any questions that you may have, etc. And then, once you've done that, to go ahead and introduce yourself in the very first forum, and then to listen to your very first lecture on why study the Gospels, why study the New Testament.